at that. We did it again. There are those anxious moments, but here we are. All right, so welcome everyone. Baruch Hashem. We have a minion of attendees. That's good. And if anyone else wants to put on their camera, you can get extra credit. So we're continuing with our Sefer. So chapter 5, I think we're going to start. We'll just start from the beginning of chapter 5, which is the chapter on separation, the middle one between Hachna'ah and Hamtakah. Okay, I guess I have to admit people. So at page 43, objectivity, it's kind of a subname, separation. Okay, so once we reduce the immensity of the anxieties, so that's the Hachna'ah, we made them smaller. And by subduing our ego, then we can proceed to Havdalah, which is separating from them. And again, this idea that it really didn't click the last time 4 years ago when we learned this together, is that the anxieties are actually proportional to the ego. If we lower the ego, the anxieties will lower. Isn't that fantastic? So simple. Just keep that in mind. And then we can detach from them. That's what this chapter is about. So this intermediate stage, this intermediate phase of therapy is an essential prerequisite for the final phase, articulating the problem. That's the sweetening, from which we heal the unhealthy situation or frame of mind. This is because in order to relate to something objectively and analyze it truthfully, we must first be released from our subjective ties to it. In other words, we have to be able to step out of it and examine this. And this is something how we've spoken about that we really all have the ability to do. I've spoken about how years and years ago, while Miriam Adahan was writing her book on Emet, and she just had a few chapters, and it was based on recovery, which was mental health through will training. And I went with a few of my Crown Heights lady friends, we even sent our husbands, to these meetings of former mental patients, where there was, how it worked was that someone would give an example. This and this happened, and I started to work myself up. And then what were my physical symptoms? What were my racing thoughts? So that's Havdalah, that's separation. So that means we all can do it. If people fresh out of the loony bin can do it, or we've been out of the loony bin longer, or visiting friends, of course. So it means we can do it. It means we have to be able to look at, separate enough from our situation to observe what are my physical symptoms. What are my racing thoughts? Like I have to have some object. I've lowered, first I have to do the Hachna'ah, make it smaller because it wants to fill my whole consciousness. Where is my cell phone? Will all our enemies attack at once? Whatever it is that could be going through our mind at any point, we make it smaller and then we objectively look at it. Here it's called ignoring anxiety, but I guess there's an element. It's stepping outside of it. It's predicated on the assumption that the essence, oh, here's a good one, the essence of the divine soul is unaffected by the weaknesses of the animal soul. And it is therefore possible to rectify our problems by bringing our divine side to the fore, enabling it to assume full reign over our personality, at least from time to time. In other words, the idea is that we have to at least at some points identify with our divine soul, which is unsullied, regardless of what we did, regardless of what traumatic things happened to us. The divine soul, which is a part of Hashem, is unsullied. And this is who we are. This is the deepest level of our personality. The ego animal soul, we're kind of used to it. It's been around for a long time, as long as we can remember. So we want to have another view. Even if we can identify, the more we identify with the divine soul, even just to call up its recollection when I'm making a decision, my animal soul has given its opinion. And now I'm giving my divine soul, yes, divine soul, what do you think I should do? We want it to start expressing itself more. We want to give it a chance to express itself. And then Western psychology doesn't generally speak of a divine soul. Okay, turning the page to page 44. Identifying with our divine soul gives us an abstract vantage point in our mind from which we can relate impartially to the world and to our own problems and anxieties. When I read this, Identifying with the Divine Soul, what I thought of was this idea that we learned from Yosef Hatzadik. I wasn't sold, I was sent. You know, his brothers are trying to apologize to him. We didn't mean to sell you as a slave. And he said, you know, I wasn't sold, I was sent. Hashem sent me. This was my shlichus. Hashem sent me on my shlichus. This is, and this is true for all of us. This is true for all of us. We all have a divine mission, all of us. And we had to go through whatever we had to go through, you know, ultimately, that's why we're reading this book, Transforming Darkness into Light. All of it can be transformed into light. All of it. All of it. Isn't that exciting? So much stuff. We're going to get a lot of life when we get that down. Yes, so this is the idea. I really love this idea from Yosef. I wasn't sold, I was sent. I was sent on shlichus. This was his shlichus. He saved the world from starvation. How it happened was that his brother sold him into slavery, but that was the shlichus. How else could he become the viceroy of Mitzrayim? Okay. So see what needs to be rectified and begin to see how to rectify it. So when we can view our situation somewhere more objectively, we can see what needs to be rectified and begin to see how to rectify it. And this takes clarity. We've spoken about this before. Clarity is something we need to daven for ourselves and to bless our friends with clarity. And sometimes a good friend, you know, it says in Pirkei Avos, buy yourself a friend. It's that good friend who can often give us clarity because they're more objective. So clarity, again, what is the clarity for? To see what needs to be rectified and begin to see how to rectify it. Okay. Without this detachment, we're trapped by the world, and our ability to rectify the world and transform it into a home for Hashem depends on our ability to feel that we ourselves are not subject to the inherent constrictions of the world. So detachment is a prerequisite to influence. Interesting, this idea, detachment is a prerequisite to influence. It's an interesting and short is a prerequisite. It's a 5-word sentence. And when I read this last night while preparing, what occurred to me first was the idea, you know, sometimes we want to bring our friends and family members closer to Yiddishkeit, but there has to be, you know, it has to, the ego can't be involved because that becomes a turnoff. So it's a big deal. That's the detachment. You know, we're giving someone the opportunity, which reminds me, you know, in chapter 32 of Tanya, the chapter on Avos Yisroel, the Alter Rebbe says, you know, after we shower people with love, maybe we'll be able to, bring them closer to the Torah and Hashem. And if not, we haven't forfeited the merit of Avos Reim, of loving your fellow as yourself. And this also I found quite mind-blowing, because whether we or not we succeed in bringing another soul closer to Hashem is totally up to Hashem. It's totally not, you know, it's all Hashgacha Pratis and Gilgulim, but there is a reward for how much we love the person that we have control over. And I have something about that idea. So whether or not we brought them closer, the reward is for how much we love them. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great idea? We have to just love the people, and maybe Hashem will give us the schus. He'll give us the merit to bring another Jew closer to Hashem. course, it is a great feeling. It does bring a lot of joy. The Rebbe was really telling us how to bring joy. Want to bring joy into your life? Bring another Jew closer. Bring another Jew closer to Hashem. Or many things. Also, it's very joyful to make a shidduch. Wow. A woman I know who is very successful in making shidduchim said that she thought when Hashem saw somebody needs like an up in their life, he lets them make a successful shidduch, and then it is happy. So again, these are the things that bring joy into the world. So detachment is a prerequisite to influence. That was the middle of page 44. Thus, before we proceed to the stage of sweetening, wherein we transform Hashem's concealment in this world into the divine revelation it was meant to be. Now that sounds like a good shlichus, doesn't it? Transforming Hashem's concealment in this world into the divine revelation it was meant to be, we must first pass through the stage of separation. So that's what we're going to learn now. So the three stages of separation. So again, since all of these three things are incorporated into Hitchalut and inter-included, so there's going to be three stages of separation: the Hachna'ah, the Havdalah, and the Hamtakah. So the first one is dismissing negative thoughts, submission within separation, Hachna'ah within Havdalah. In everyday life, we constantly ignore anxiety by spontaneously dismissing most of the thoughts that surface from the subconscious. So this is a healthy form of suppression that simply prevents every little negative urge or complex that comes to mind from derailing the normal functions of living. Often these murmurings are not very deeply rooted in the subconscious and therefore do not warrant much attention. In these cases, ignoring the problem is indeed the best way to deal with it. As we have noted, exaggerated attention, too much attention can aggravate a problem. In other words, we've already have some success in doing this. We don't stop everything just to be anxious. Sometimes, we finish the shopping list. We can do things where we already have what this is saying is that we already have the ability to not focus on our anxiety. It's not a totally new experience. More full-blown anxieties require conscious dismissal, a deliberate choice to ignore what presents itself as a burning issue. In this spirit, the sages teach us that the best way to fight anger is to remain silent, and the best way to deal with jealousy is to ignore it, which again is such an important piece of information. And it's so simple. It's actually from Reishis Chachma, Eliyahu Davidus, who was one of the great guys living in the 1500s in Sfat with the Arizal. He was a student of the Ramak and a student of the Ari, Eliyahu Davidus. His sefer is called Reishis Chachma. It's often quoted, and he says, the best way to fight anger is to remain silent, and the best way to deal with jealousy is to ignore it. And this seems like something that people should learn in first grade, because jealousy can be very painful, and someone might not know that they have the ability to ignore it. Isn't that exciting news? We're so lucky. This is the inner teachings of Torah. Okay, the middle of page 45. Along with ignoring our problems, and especially if our dark thoughts do not leave us alone and we are unable to simply ignore them, we should turn heavenward and implore Hashem for help. Implore Hashem for help. The fact that we are still beset by anxieties indicates that it was not enough to ask Hashem to bring us closer to Him. That's to bring us closer to Him. When we spoke about how the Rambam said that the Rambam said the Maharal said the simplest kavan in davening is I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. Okay, so we have to ask Hashem to bring us closer to Him and to save us from the dark thoughts that engulf us. In other words, if I'm feeling obsessed, some things I can dismiss on my own. I realize it's not really worth thinking about this, and I can choose my thoughts. Thoughts are a garment. Sometimes it becomes obsessive. So sometimes it can help to speak to a friend, and sometimes it could speak, that friend could be Hashem, to ask him, please help me. This is the end of chapter 28 of Tanya, the next paragraph also. If our prayer is sincere and earnest enough, Hashem will come to the rescue. The soul is the divine dimension of the human being. As the Torah says, Hashem's people are part of him, Chelek Elokai. So by beseeching Hashem to rescue our soul, we are in effect calling upon him to assist his own representative, a spark of his own essence. The soul is him in its struggle to overcome the forces of evil. Since Hashem has, so to speak, a vested interest in the spiritual success of every one of us in our struggle to conquer evil, he will save us for his own sake. Again, this is how chapter 28 ends. Ask Hashem, in case we're worried, maybe I'm not such a good person that Hashem should save me, but I do have a soul, which is part of Hashem's essence. So please, Hashem, for your sake, help me overcome these thoughts that are driving me crazy. So I guess this the first category here is what we naturally don't follow every anxiety that arises. Then there are anxieties, bigger anxieties that arise that we have to consciously choose not to follow. And then there are ones, sometimes it happens to the best of us. Something can happen. It could be anything, a family situation, whatever. And we become obsessed. And so then and we feel that we can't free ourselves, we have to either speak to a trusted friend or mentor or beseech Hashem. Save me for the sake of the piece of your essence that's within me. We have to try that because we can't, no more being obsessed. Okay, that Hashem is always standing at our side, this idea to help us. It's in Tehillim. See footnote 5 on page, we're on page 162 for those who like to look inside. As it is written in Tehillim 109, line 31, for Hashem stands at the right of the destitute to save him from those who judge his soul. So we have to call on Hashem more. We've also spoken about the idea that the Ramban felt that women should daven 2 Shmona Esreis a day, and the Alter Rebbe also accepted that, encouraged that his Hasidic ladies should daven 2 Shmona Esreis a day. The Rambam, on the other hand, says women are yotzi if we say, God help me once a day. And sometimes, there are sometimes days, there can be days in one's life that it's just so many things that it's not possible to daven 2 Shmona Esreis a day. But there's always time to say, God help me. And we can depend on the Rambam. The Rambam said, I'm in. I said, God help me. Okay. So let's see. Yes, I'm turning the page. When we consciously, top of page 46, when we consciously choose to step out of a problem or appeal to Hashem for help, we are admitting that confronting it ourselves would make matters worse. Realizing that we cannot deal with our problems alone directly prevents our ego from reasserting ourselves. Like we're saying to the ego, I need Hashem's help here. Sorry, you're not God. Where you have to tell the ego the bad news that it's not God. And I'm turning to God to help me. So that in itself lowers the ego. That in itself is hachna'ah. Okay, this admission of our inadequacy and our reliance on Hashem is the sub-phase of submission within separation. At this point, we are not yet attempting a direct confrontation with darkness, nor are we even asking for Hashem for strength to combat it. We're asking just that he should save us for his sake. Okay, now we're up to the fifth, the middle of the 9 stages, separation within separation. And it's redefined. The subtitle is self-redefinition. Self-redefinition. Doesn't that sound good? These are also things that should be taught in elementary school. There were many times in my young life that I could have really used some self-redefinition. I didn't know it was a possible thing. I didn't know it was a possibility, self-redefinition. But ultimately, we're learning that it is, and it's the middle of the stages here of transforming darkness into light. The middle stage is self-redefinition. Let's learn a little bit about it. The next stage of therapy is positive self-redefinition. As we said previously, one of the dangers of anxiety is that it may encourage us to define ourselves in terms of our problems. We don't want to define ourselves in terms of our problems. We can counter this pitfall by becoming aware of our divine soul, the undefiled point of inner purity that cannot be sullied by the illusions of the animal soul's ego and the anxieties it produces. So the undefiled point of inner purity, and it's funny how this is repeated each time. I think it takes a long time for it to really set in that we take it as a truth. Like it's not just an intellectual truth. It's something we can feel in our heart that we have a piece of Hashem's as this part of us that's unsullied. We have an unsullied core, and that's what we need to identify with rather than hating myself for all the stupid mistakes I've made or feeling subhuman because of various unpleasant childhood experiences or anything we could name that became part of our self-definition. That's not helpful. That doesn't help us serve Hashem b'simcha. That makes us miserable. So we can renew our self-definition. This is what we're learning. This is the middle step. Okay. Despite the real or imagined gravity of our situation, there remains deep within us an untouched and unaffected point of wholeness and goodness. Wow. Deep within us, no matter what we've been through as the Jewish people over all of our Gilgulim, just after this particular lifetime. So there is an untouched and unaffected point of wholeness and goodness. We must know this. It's never too late, but it's of course easier if one learns this from the time of birth, from the time of being a fetus in one's mother's womb, but it's never too late. We can learn it now, that we have deep within us this untouched wholeness and goodness. As soon as we remember this, we can use this point to recast our whole situation in a more positive light. This is such an important idea. Okay, let's first identify with the divine soul, and then let's look at our situation afresh. Let's look at our situation with more clarity. Okay. Without this awareness, we may conceive of our inner selves as problematic or even tainted by some psychological disorder or complex. Right, that's not a good feeling. Am I manic depressive, or just do I have a borderline personality disorder? I'm laughing and crying at the same time, don't get me wrong. Okay, we want to define ourselves as having a piece of Hashem's essence, and that's we're going to rebuild our personalities around this and recast our whole situation in a more positive light. Okay, so without this awareness, we can feel tainted by some psychological disorder. In truth, however, we possess an identity and selfhood that is independent of our anxieties. This is so important. I mean, first we have to decide, do we believe it? Do we believe that we possess an identity and selfhood independent of our anxieties? That's the prerequisite for this university. Like we heard it earlier, we've heard it in the past. We said yes, probably true, if Rav Yitzchak says it. Okay, but now we have to kind of live with it. We have to make it part of ourselves and practice that we possess an identity and selfhood that is independent of our anxieties. If we can gradually identify with this inner point of health, we can rehabilitate ourselves in its image. So this divine soul is our inner point. It's our inner point of health. We have a healthy divine soul, and we can rehabilitate our whole self around it. It's the core for healing. Okay, this inner point of health. Okay, so let's go over just what we did today. So we started chapter 5 on Havdalah, separation. And we hear how it's about objectivity. The introduction is saying the prerequisite of separation is objectivity. I have to be able to step out of myself and see what what's going on. What does anxiety feel like? Feel your anxiety. Take careful, whatever it is, whatever difficult emotion we're experiencing. And there's many different ones. I'm laughing and crying, hatred, anger, depression, whatever it is. Let's do a psychological science project. What are my physical symptoms? What are my racing thoughts? This is objectivity. Okay? Then the idea that I wasn't sold, I was sent, that all the experiences in our life, all the circumstances of our life up to and including this moment was Hashem sending us on our shlichus. We can empathize with people because of what we've been through, etc. Tell jokes, whatever the case may be. Then we get to the middle, the separation within separate. No, first dismissing negative thoughts. Excuse me. So the first part of separation is dismissing negative thoughts. Now that shouldn't be too difficult. Well, the prerequisite, of course, is to know what we're thinking. When I first heard this idea, it seemed overwhelming. When I first started to study meditation many, many years ago, even before I was from, and you have to know what you're thinking. I mean, it just seemed like an impossible task going so many years without really having any guide that I could examine my thinking. That thinking is something to look at. Thinking is something to refine. Okay, so we need to dismissing negative thoughts, not identifying with them. I don't have to think this any longer. And if it's a problem, ultimately to ask Hashem for help. Help, God help me. And if you're a woman, you're Yotzi on davening. Of course, we encourage everyone to follow the Alter Rebbe and get those Shmona Esreis in, but we can depend on the Rambam. Hashem should save us for his sake. That's step 4, dismissing negative thoughts, submission within separation. And then we started tonight, self-redefinition, separation within separation, which means we have this inner core of purity that cannot be sullied. And we can use this to recast our whole situation. We don't have to conceive of ourselves. I'm laughing, as tainted by some psychological problem or disorder. No, because we possess an identity and selfhood that is independent of our anxieties. And as we identify with that, we can rehabilitate our mental health with this as the core, our divine soul, our unsullied divine soul. And we're just kind of walking around as unsullied divine souls. And we're using that to rehabilitate ourselves. Okay, so that's, I think, as far as we'll go today. It's a lot to think about. And this is the week of Tisha B'Av, so everyone should have an easy fast and a meaningful fast, they say, and it should be the Geula by then. Come on, I really could be the Geula by then. I'm almost convinced. So let's take a get well picture for Rav Yitzhak Feivish ben Brian Malka, who's been composing Nigunim. And Rachel Ferenczi has like a WhatsApp group where she puts up the Nigunim as Rav Yitzhak sings them, because she writes the notes. She's very talented and could hear the notes and write it down. And she has we'll have to get that. I'm going to try to include that WhatsApp group in the little group, in our group that you click on for our class, Rachel Ferenczi. And then we can you can hear Rav Yitzhak singing the Nigunim. It's very inspiring. Okay, let's take our get well picture. Now, everyone who would like to get that get well smile can put on their cameras. Oh, that's a nice one. Thank you, Rachel. That's very inspiring. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Great. Mwah. Love you all. So nice to bring together. It should be a really great week of the good. Look, 2 people there. That's a special bargain. That is great. So thank you all. Lots of love, really, and see you again soon. Shalom, shalom.